there's so much about it out there that the downfall of WCW and these things. So much of it ends up attacks at you. And how do you just kind of navigate a lot of this stuff where it's just a bunch of fodder?
It's taking time. Keep in mind, I was active in the industry for 30 plus years, I guess. And during that period of time, I took a lot of heat. You know, it started out with, why the hell does this guy get this job? Going back to the AWA when I ended up on camera.
Right.
A lot of the wrestling talent there at that point in time, they didn't really have anything against me, but it was like, who is this new kid that's never spent a nickel or never spent a minute in the wrestling business, has never drawn a nickel, doesn't even know how to lace up a pair of wrestling boots, how is this kid? He doesn't know anybody. He didn't come up in the business. His family wasn't in the business. This Eric Bischoff character just came from out of nowhere and ended up hosting a show on ESPN 5 days a week. How does that have, there was a resentment about that.
Yeah.
Because I had no experience. And I understand that. I didn't take that personally. It's kind of comes with the territory. But as things progressed over time, and then I made it to WCW and kind of the same thing, people kind of recognized I had a little bit more experience by that point, but it was still, I was the outsider. I didn't come up in the wrestling business. I didn't come into the business the way most people did. And as a result, I think inherently there was just a fair amount of, I don't want to call it natural resentment or jealousy, but it was there.
Yeah.
And then eventually it became, the dirt sheet writers and the rag sheets and people like Dave Meltzer and all. They had their own opinion and their narrative. And then that began to grow. As my profile began to grow, so did the narrative from others. And to top it all off, I became the president of a division of Turner Broadcasting. By the way, I had no corporate experience prior to that. I was a talent, but here I am, president of a division of Turner Broadcasting. That really created some resentment internally by people, in the company that kind of felt that they deserved that. Right. And of course, they would leak things to people like Dave Meltzer, and they had their own agenda and reasons for doing it, and it just grew and grew and grew. But it bothered me a lot, to be honest with you. Early on, and when I say bothered me, like I didn't go home and whine about it or complain to my wife about it or sit and be miserable about it. My nature is to fight back. I'll come back at you. I'll counterpunch. My nature is to fight first and then start thinking about things later.
That's got me in trouble a few times.
And here's how that worked out for me, though. By fighting back and calling out certain people, and I've been doing it for a long time. I did it long before social media, became a thing. Those people, those individuals who had their own agenda and their own feelings about me, rather than sitting back and shutting up, what did they do? They did what most people would do, is they started coming on even stronger. So I developed this love-hate without the love relationship with these dirt sheet writers, and it just continued to escalate. And throughout my career, no matter what move I made, you always had a group of people like the Dave Meltzers and the amoeba that follow him, or I should say not follow him, but believe him.
Right.
And not just Dave, others, just kind of camped out of that camp. But, I got to the point where it stopped bothering me and I started having fun with it. Like now I have fun with it. I purposely will sometimes post things on Twitter that I know will, irritate the dirt sheet community. And I do it just for fun. I just like fucking with it. and to a degree, because when they do that stuff, they expose themselves for what little they really know about the industry, and they expose themselves as just being, fanatical anti-Eric Bischoff wrestling dirt sheet readers.
This is the Knockin' Doorz Down podcast, featuring celebrities, experts, and everyday people who have overcome adversities, including addiction, mental health, and trauma, to live purposeful lives. And that's what Knockin' Doorz Down is all about.
This podcast contains the views and opinions of the Knockin' Doorz Down hosts and their guests to the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is sharing their unique perspective, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Privacy is of the utmost importance to us. For those wishing anonymity, people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect confidentiality at the request of certain guests. This website or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship. If you find any errors in any of the content of this podcast or blogs, please send a message through the contact page. This podcast is owned by KDD Media Company.